There are a lot of things to love about anime. The complicated storylines, the universe building, the fantastic endings, the well-animated fights, the life lessons. Genuinely, there is so much to enjoy about, learn, and glean from anime. And it's why I believe it's not going anywhere anytime soon. However, there's also some things to dislike about anime. The incestual storylines, the over-sexualization of minors, the ever-relenting need to yell out every single thing you're doing. Two of those things are not like the other. And honestly, fortunately for anime and manga enjoyers all across the globe who have developed frontal cortexes, it appears as though, as time goes on, these tropes are being less and less used in anime and manga across the globe. And thank God for it, because why would you include any of that? However, while these are very well-known and dislikable things about anime, that doesn't mean that's all there is to dislike about anime. As one of the biggest complaints that anime fans have about anime and manga all across the globe, while not quite as big as incest or the sexualization of minors, is the lack of female representation. However, the anime and manga community are of two ways about this. See, anime and manga for a long time have been heavily gendered, especially when it comes to mangas targeted at what are usually manga demographic ages, which is why in Japan, shonen, which is meant for young boys, and shoujo, which is meant for young girls, exists. However, while a lot of shoujo manga are a lot of fun, unfortunately in terms of complexity and plot lines, shoujo manga tend to fall flatter than shonen manga. And as anime and manga fan bases have gotten more global by the year, more and more people who are outside of what would be deemed the regular demographics of shonen or shoujo manga have found themselves reading those IP. And thus now in modern day 2024, anime and manga have the most diverse fan bases they've ever had. However, when you're in a heavily gendered medium, where shoujo manga and anime tend to have female leads and shonen anime and manga tend to have male leads, unfortunately when you get crossover, people who are crossing over from their respective gendered side of the role may feel as though they're underrepresented in the manga or the anime that they're interacting with. And this is incredibly fair. The disparity between male and female leads in shonen and shoujo manga respectively is quite large. However, like all of the other persistent and frowned upon tropes in Japanese anime and manga, this is changing, as over the past couple of decades, some of the most important and riveting shonen manga have been led by a female cast, or at least a female MC, and the exact opposite is happening in shoujo IP. And thus, that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Today, I want to highlight 10 of the best female-led manga and anime of the last 2 decades. Manga and anime that hold a dear part of my heart. So if any of you out there are looking for an anime or manga led by a female, let this serve as a recommendation list of sorts. Because today, we're talking the top 10 female-led anime, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow my brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, a couple of rules here. Unfortunately, when it comes down to a female-led anime, a lot of the time, they're not the only MC. A lot of anime have multiple MCs. Kaiju number 8, Black Clover, so on and so forth. And therefore, for the confines of today's video, we're only going to be talking about IP where the female MC is the true lead. The most compelling, the most interesting, and the most important character in the trio, duo, or quadro of MCs. So anime and manga like Black Clover or Kaiju number 8 that do have very pertinent female characters like Kikoro Shinomiya or Noelle will not be taken into consideration, but they are great watches. With that out of the way, let's get into the list. Because coming up at number 10, we had the anime that audibly made me go, oh God, Made in Abyss. So what appears to be in the beginning of Made of Abyss, a cute, light, and chibi-esque story slowly devolves into basically anything but that. See, Made in Abyss at its shallowest level is a story about a girl going on a trip with her robot into a chasm to find her mother. The main character of this story is a girl by the name of Riko, a child who spent her entire life looking up to her mother, who is one of the greatest adventurers of their time. Now, the Made in Abyss world revolves around a chasm, a magical chasm of sorts. And adventurers train their entire lives to go deeper and deeper into this chasm, unlocking the secrets of this chasm and finding incredibly valuable items, tools, and monsters down in its depths. However, the chasm works in a rather interesting way. See, the deeper you go into this chasm, the more pressure is exerted onto your body, which means should somebody who tries to make it to the bottom of this chasm without any training would essentially have all of their insides squished until eventually they leaked out of their faces. And unfortunately, this is something that Riko's gonna have to deal with at one one point or another, because Rico's mother disappears shortly after Rico's birth on an adventure down in the chasm. So when Rico eventually gets a letter from her mother telling her to adventure to the bottom of the chasm to find her, Rico jumps at the chance. However, not before happening upon a lost robot, who Rico and her friends name Reg. See, Reg was found on the first level of the abyss, where basically everybody can exist. Rico and her friends sneak Reg into the orphanage they all live in, and they become a close-knit group of friends. That is until eventually Rico's mother's white whistle and notes detailing the deepest levels of the chasm are found, with a note amongst these pages of details, presumably telling Rico that her mother is waiting for her at the bottom of this chasm, and thus Rico must try to accomplish what her mother accomplished decades prior: becoming a white whistle, one of the few people on Earth able to brave the deepest and darkest parts of the chasm and not die. Made in Abyss released a 13-episode season, which got such roaring success that it got 2 companion movies and a sequel announced, which aired in May 2021. It is a dark, dreary, and surprising story led by a child who shows more strength than many characters in anime, and I highly recommend it as a watch. However, not as highly as I recommend the number 9 entry on this list, Darling in the Franxx. Now, for those of you who haven't seen Darling in the Franxx, you've probably seen 02. She is in every single anime convention as a statue, a body pillow, or a poster. However, unfortunately, the sexualization of 02 does a great disservice to who she is as a character. See, Darling in the Franxx is an anime made by Cloverworks, Trigger, and A1 Pictures. Those are 3 of some of, if not the greatest anime studios out. So when it comes down to visual appeal, you'll be hard-pressed to find an anime more gorgeous than this one. See, Darling in the Franxx takes place in a dystopian, far-off future, where the last dregs of human civilization have had to abandon Earth's surface. See, in this timeline, humanity has accomplished immortality, and thus adults live in technologically advanced cities. But as they're immortal, and as they're trying to keep the population under control, procreation and relationships are gone, and thus all of the children, or not all of the children, but the majority of the children in this story are artificially created and known as parasites, and their only roles in their relatively short lives is to pilot Franxx in pairs of 2. Now, this is because the immortal humans don't want to defend humanity by themselves. They don't want to give up their immortality, and thus the parasites are raised in what's known as bird cages, where these artificially created kids are allowed to have relationships with each other and live by the bygone ways of humanity, because an emotional connection to your partner is necessary to pilot your Franxx, at least successfully. Now, the reason that the pilots and Franxx are so needed is because the Earth has entered into a war against giant kaiju-like monsters known as Klaxosaurs. Now, in order to battle against these Klaxosaurs, a boy-girl team is necessary to pilot a Franxx. And that you're gonna have to stick with me here for a second. The male parasite in this equation is known as a stamen, and the female parasite is known as a pistil, which are the reproductive organs of a flower. Now, the story revolves around Hero and 02. Hero, who is a former pilot prodigy who can no longer synchronize with his female duo, and 02, who is a parasite with Klaxosaur blood, making her a hybrid of sorts, but also making her an incredibly powerful Franxx pilot. Now, story revolves around the emotional connection between the 2 of them and how 02 is known for killing her partners, as the energy that she generates while controlling her Franxx is usually too much for her stamen. Listen, I'm not gonna sit here and sugarcoat it. This story is chock full of sexualization. The position that the stamen and the pistil have to get into to pilot the Franxx is ridiculous. However, 02 is the star of this show. While Hero might be technically the MC of this show, he's not the most compelling character. Finding out how 02 has been demonized and used by the adults of this universe to defend the Earth that they no longer really care about, and showing that she uses this overt sexual nature of hers to truly actually keep people at bay because of the dark, dreary, and incredibly oppressed backstory that she has, makes her a character much more compelling than anime conventions seem to want you to think she is. So, while this anime came out at the perfect time, considering the fact that I was 20 when it released, and therefore I didn't have the sophisticated tastes I have now, it is, for all intents and purposes, a very serviceable and very fun mech anime, with an ending that I liked, but a lot of people hate. But fortunately, that's the last anime that's gonna have any caveats, because coming up at number 8, we have the number 1 anime I will never stop talking about until it gets to season 2, Wonder Egg Priority. See, Wonder Egg Priority, rather ironically, is kind of, to me at least, the spiritual successor of Puele Magi Madoka Magica. It is a show that takes the idea of magical girls and turns turns it directly on its head. See, not only is this one of the most beautifully animated shows I've ever seen in my life, it's animated by Cloverworks, it is one of the most compelling, gripping stories you will ever interact with. Now, objectively, if you have some triggers like unaliving, I wouldn't necessarily watch or interact with this IP, because that's basically the entire plot of this show. See, the series follows a girl by the name of Ai, which means love in Japan, who's in junior high but isn't currently attending school because her close friend just committed unalive. However, late night during a walk by herself, Ai is guided to an abandoned arcade by a mysterious voice, where she stumbles upon a gashapon machine that delivers her a wonder egg. And that night, Ai gets pulled into a dream world that seems to exist within this wonder egg. And it's revealed that this dream world is actually the dream world of a girl that Ai doesn't even know. However, Ai needs to protect this girl from a horde of evil beings known as See No Evils. It's See No Evils. See no evils, but it's supposed to be a play on see no, hear no, say no evils. However, the motivation for Ai to save these girls is that the mysterious voice tells her that if she saves enough of these girls, they'll actually be able to bring her best friend back to life. And thus Ai continues to buy wonder eggs and protect the girls in these dreams. And along the way, she meets up with 3 other girls in very similar situations as hers. This story tackles the ideas of self-harm, bullying, unaliving better than genuinely every IP I've ever interacted with. It is a deep, heavy, emotional watch that goes alongside one of the best soundtracks and one of the best animation teams I've ever seen. But do beware, it is only 12 episodes, and we have been waiting on a second season now for 3 years. If you want to feel some hurt immediately followed by joy and hope, my God, can I not recommend this anime any higher? But since we're talking about magical girls, let's talk about the mandatory number 7 entry on this list, Sailor Moon.
Nick, what do you mean Sailor Moon's at number 7?
Listen, I love Sailor Moon. It's one of the most important anime IP of all time, but it's got some problems. Sailor Moon Crystal was really good, all 39 episodes of it, but come on, we both know there's filler issues in the original Sailor Moon. But it doesn't at all take away from what Sailor Moon has accomplished by being what is essentially the biggest female-led anime IP of all time. See, I feel as though I don't even need to explain what Sailor Moon is about, but I'll go over it. Sailor Moon is a story that revolves around a girl by the name of Usagi, who befriends a black cat by the name of Luna. Luna can talk, and Luna gives Usagi a magical brooch that allows her to turn into the mythical Sailor Moon, a guardian destined to save Earth from the forces of evil. Luna and Usagi then go on a massive tour to try and find all the other Sailor Guardians, and thus they find Sailor Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the Tuxedo Mask, who is the one hint of male representation in the entirety of this manga, and by far and away the least helpful person. The entire plot of Sailor Moon revolves around the Sailor Guardians trying to find the Silver Crystal and their princess. And thus over the course of Sailor Moon, those wants put them in opposition against people like the Dark Moon Clan, the Dark Kingdom, the Death Busters, the Dead Moon Circus, Shadow Galactica, and so many others. On top of this, as the story progresses, other Sailor Guardians like Sailor Uranus and Sailor Mercury join the team. Without the creation of Sailor Moon, the landscape of anime and manga today would be massively different. Well, yes, at the end of the day, this was a magical girl anime. The action, the drama, and the character building displayed in this anime and manga were second to none at the time. And thus the idea that teenage girls could go out there and bust evil forces with the power of gods got instilled in an entire community and generation's minds, which not only undoubtedly led to multiple female manga artists picking up their pen and writing action-based stories, but also got many more female readers into more action-oriented manga. Now, the story is not perfect, but it is worth a nostalgia watch, in the same way that OG Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z are worth a watch. Anime has come a long way, but it's still really cool to see how it not all started, but how it all blew up. Now, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum at number 6, we have Black Lagoon. I'm not kidding. If there is one IP that's as far removed from Sailor Moon as possible, it's probably Black Lagoon, with the only similarity between the two IP being they're both led by a woman. I mean, after all, this is a story about a team of pirate mercenaries known as the Lagoon Company, who smuggle goods in and around the seas of Southeast Asia in the late 1990s. Now, technically, the story does revolve around 4 characters, the 4 members of the Lagoon Company, those being Dutch, the leader, Benny, the mechanic, Rock, the pseudo main character of the story, an ex-salaryman who becomes a negotiator and professional face, and Revy, the real main character of this story, who is the group's main gunfighter. And the entirety of this story revolves around what One Piece stories kind of should be. Pirates running smuggling trips around Southeast Asia for a variety of different crime syndicates. Whether it's the Italian Mafia, the Russian crime syndicate, the Triad, the Lagoon Company will smuggle goods for all of them. And while they always get the job done, it's never done clean, as almost every single smuggling run ends with a massive gunfight or fistfight, all of which Revy is at the center of. Revy is not only one of the most badass and compelling female MCs in anime and manga, she's just one of the most badass and most compelling. The constant cigarette hanging out of her face as she dual wields Berettas, firing into crowds of people, really resonates a whole lot differently than Usagi in Sailor Moon. And yet, as these pirates are just that, the pirates, you can't help but love the cast of Black Lagoon. There's only 24 episodes of Black Lagoon and then a 5-episode OVA, so you can get it done in a week if you want to. And I highly recommend that you do. But enough of stories that reach a satisfying conclusion, because coming up at number 5, we got Nana. Nana was at one point the most popular manga on Earth. Yes, Nana has twice, in 2 separate years, outsold both Naruto and One Piece as the most popular and high-selling manga of the year. But how? How could this story that I've never heard of or watched before be more popular than One Piece and Naruto? Well, because Nana is received as quite possibly the greatest shoujo anime and manga of all time. The story revolves around 2 women in 2001 who both moved to Tokyo, Nana Osaki and Nana Komatsu. Though to avoid confusion, Nana Komatsu goes as Hachi. Nana Osaki moves to Tokyo to pursue her music career, while Nana Komatsu, or Hachi, moves to Tokyo to be with her boyfriend and all of her other friends. And while these 2 characters share a name in Nana, they couldn't be more different. However, as the story progresses, the 2 of them become closer and closer, and their relationship becomes more and more complicated, but more and more beautiful. As Nana Osaki slowly but surely becomes famous with her band, Nana K and Nana O slowly but surely deal with intimacy issues as they fall in love with friends that are very close to each other. And the story revolves around a very accurate depiction of female friendship, how love can get in the way, how the thought of losing your best friend can cause you to have panic attacks and feel as though your world is crumbling out from under you. The story dives deep into things like fame and the tabloids and stress and early pregnancies and shotgun weddings, and really when it comes down to it, the characters drive this story. Their developmental arcs and all that they go through are highly relatable stories. As will not all of us have ever been famous rock stars, all of us have had fights with friends and moments we appreciate. All of us have had complicated feelings about those we adore the most in our lives. And while this is considered to be probably the greatest shoujo anime and manga of all time, it is indefinitely on hiatus and has been so since 2009. So ready yourself for that if you ever decided on picking up this IP, because everything that is out, all 21 volumes of it, is incredible, but much like Hunter x Hunter, which comes back October 7th, it's not finished and probably will never be. But enough about those unfinished stories. Let's get into some stories that are finished and that I adore so much that I literally put them on my body. That's the wrong side. It's hard to show the inside of your arm. Because coming up at number 4, we have Killa Kill. Killa Kill, like I've already told you, is one of my favorite anime of all time. That's why I have Rukia Matoy right here, and in her scissor blade, Satsuki Kirowine's eyes. This is by far and away the best anime that Studio Trigger has ever created, with the possible exception of Delicious in Dungeon. This is also, fun fact, Trigger's first ever anime. And if you ask me, they crushed it. The story of Killa Kill is objectively absurd. And if you're looking for a story with no fan service, then I'm sorry, you've come to the wrong place. However, and I kind of hate to be that guy, the fan service in Killa Kill is actually meant to poke fun at the fan service trope in the rest of shonen anime and manga. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's not running around in BDSM gear or very scantily clad sailor uniforms, but the fan service going on here is actually meant to be a joke. As to whether or not that helps you consume this show as a full-fledged adult, that's between you and Hashirama. But this story revolves around a girl by the name of Rukia Matoy, a vagrant transfer student who transfers to Hono City High to find the murderer of her father, Ishin Matoy. This brings her to Hanoji Academy, a militaristic high school led by the student council, not teachers. At the school, President Satsuki Kirowine and her cabinet members of her student council, who are known as the Elite Four, gain a massive amount of power by monopolizing an entity known as life fibers. Now, these life fibers are essentially sentient, superpowered fibers that can be woven into uniforms. And depending on how many life fibers a certain uniform has, the more power it's able to convey the user. And therefore, the higher that somebody sits in the government of Honnoji Academy, the stronger their uniform is. However, Rukio Matoi, with her scissor blade that was given to her by her father, is able to destroy these life fiber uniforms, and therefore her journey to find her father's murderer takes her head-to-head with all of the elites at Honnoji Academy, as she tries to slice through the life fiber-laden uniforms of all of the elites of Honnoji Academy. This story is not only packed to the gills with some of the best comedy I've ever seen in anime, but is also almost entirely led with a female cast, as the main antagonist and main protagonist are all female, and all drastically different from each other in a way that feels fresh and fun. The fantastic relationship of Mako and Rukia truly carries this anime into the heights of some of the greatest anime ever made. It ties into the fact that this story ends with one of the greatest twists in manga and anime history, and on the journey to that twist is filled with some of the most gorgeously animated and compelling fights I've ever seen in anime, and you have what I genuinely believe to be a masterpiece of an anime. But there's a lot of fan service. But it's funny. Kind of, most of the time. But since we're talking about literal masterpieces, that brings us to our number 3 entry. Fate. Now, Fate is another one of those interesting spots, because Fate has a ton of main characters. Fate is also kind of a catch-all term for like 17 different IPs. However, rather consistently, at the core of every single Fate IP is a very important female protagonist, who so therefore happens to be also somebody I have tattooed on me. I blur the foot out, Cody. See, because while the main character caster might be different in Fate Zero, or Fate Unlimited Blade Works, or Fate Stay Night, a through line with pretty much every single Fate IP is that the main hero is Saber. And as to whether or not Saber is Alteria Pendragon, the character I have tattooed on my calf, Mordred, or Nero Claudius, a through line to most Sabers, at least in the animated series, is that they're women. Ties into the fact that the most consistent character across most Fate IP is Rin Tosaka, who is a prodigy female caster, and even though the MCs in Fate is somewhat of a revolving door, in some capacity or another, even in Grand Babylonia, the main character of the story is a woman. But why should you watch Fate? The comprehensive, incredibly easy to understand timeline, of course, because that's what everyone says when they talk about Fate. They're like, oh my god, I'm so happy that it's so intuitive about what I need to watch and where and when. I love that there's not multiple mobile games that also have some canon plots sparse throughout them, so I have to play these obscure video games just to keep an idea on what's going on in this IP I adore. What do you mean Fate Zero is a prequel? What does that make Unlimited Blade Works? What does that make Stay Night? What do you mean the Netflix show about the world being on the moon and also a simulation wasn't canon? What do you mean Apocrypha, which introduced the greatest cast of characters and also the greatest way to do the battle for the gauntlet, also wasn't canon? Does that mean Astolfo wasn't canon? Does that mean the greatest animated fight of all time, Achilles versus Charon in Apocrypha, isn't canon? Oh, you don't know what Fate Strange Fake is? Neither do I. It's not technically out yet. Oh, you don't understand the order of Grand Babylonia? Oh, you're confused why the world is ending and there's an extra-dimensional force of people using the gauntlet to slip through time to try and save all continuous timelines? And now you're confused why you like Gilgamesh because they made him really hot and also a really good guy? But you'll never fully forgive him for what he did to Alexander the Great? That's why. That's why you watch Fate, so you can go insane while you film YouTube videos. No, but in actuality, it's one of the deepest, most well thought out and interesting universes I've ever interacted with, filled with what can only be explained as genuinely the greatest animated fights of all time. Tie that into compelling, rich, and dark historical tellings of important characters from history, and if you've ever wondered what a battle between Hercules and Alexander the Great would look like, then boy oh boy do I have a show for you. And you know, all the other stuff I just kind of blacked out while screaming about. But enough about IP with confusing timelines, let's talk about oh, well, shit. Puele Magi Madoka Magica, a story well known for not having confusing storylines. Listen, I promise I really like these stories. It's just, when you get to know them pretty well, it's tough.
Oh, Nick, what do you mean? Puele Magi Madoka Magica seems like a pretty straightforward story.
I mean, like, yeah. Kind of. The anime's easy enough to follow. You watch Rebellion, you play the video games, and things get pretty confusing pretty quickly. But let's talk about it. What is Puele Magi Madoka Magica about outside of having an incredibly complicated name? Well, it's a story about a middle school girl by the name of Madoka. One day, her and her best friend, Sayaka, stumble upon a cat-like creature by the name of Kyubi. Now, Kyubi offers these two girls a contract that he offers a whole lot of girls, which is that in exchange for the granting of one wish that they become magical girls. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Not only do I get whatever I want, I also get to become a magical girl. Yeah, That's what they think. While they're trying to figure out as to whether or not they want to join the allegiance of magical girls, a new girl by the name of Hamura transfers to their middle school and tries to stop them from making the contract while trying to kill Kyubi. And this puts them off a little bit, but fortunately they meet with an upperclassman by the name of Mami. And Mami, seeing their indecisiveness as to whether or not they want to become magical girls, decides to take them on a witch hunt. Because that's what magical girls do in the Madoka Magica Puella Magi universe. They hunt witches in like weird extra-dimensional paper mache sub-universes. And it's at this point that it's revealed to Madoka that the magical girls of this universe aren't exactly thriving. See, the magical girls of this universe give up their souls to create soul gems, the source of their magic. And the more they use their magic, the more they cloud their soul gem. And the only way to uncloud their soul gem is to exorcise witches. However, should their soul gem ever become too clouded, they themselves become witches, entering into an eternal struggle against the magical girls that they once were. And that barely scratches the surface of what this story is about. In the same way that Wonder Egg Priority took the magical girl trope and spun it on his head, Madoka Magica Puella Magi not only took the trope of magical girls and spun it on its head, it taught it breakdancing, and not like that Australian breakdancing. This is one of the darkest, most nail-bitingly intense stories, not just anime, stories you will ever interact with. The anime itself is over a decade old, and the animation still holds up to this day. The stylistic and directorial choices made over the course of this anime and the movies are genuinely some of the best I've ever seen. The characters are lovable. The twists are insane. The conclusion is satisfying. I'm not kidding. Even though this is only number 2 on the list, if you're gonna watch any show off this list, please make it Madoka Magica Puella Magi. It's Puella Magi Madoka Magica. I've been saying it wrong the entire video. My bad. Like I said, complicated title. But even that is not my number 1 pick for the greatest female-led anime of all time. No. For that, I have a pick that might be clouded by recency bias, or might just be correct. That's objectively up to you, because, well, all of this is objectively subjective. Because coming up at number 1, I have Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. This story is, it's just so goddamn good. There's no caveats, there's no other way to explain it, there's objectively nothing wrong with it. Every single character in this story is compelling for their own individual reasons. They all come together under the banner of a shared cause. It deals with interesting topics and tropes like the idea of immortality and watching the world pass by you with no promise of death. It features a young love story between 2 incredibly likable characters. It features an immortal being split between a nostalgia-ridden life and trying to appreciate the things she has in front of her currently. It's beautifully animated. The soundtrack is fantastic. And much in the same capacity that while watching One Piece, you feel like you're on a journey with the Straw Hats, while watching Frieren, you feel like you're in a blissful fantasy-based adventure heading northbound on a mysterious continent. But what is the story about? Well, the story follows an elven mage by the name of Frieren, and the story interestingly starts at the end of Frieren's most important ever journey. A decade-long journey where her and the now called band of heroes defeated the Demon King of this continent, freeing the world from a human lifetime under the thumb of the Demon King and demonkind. Now, this heroic group was 4 people. The hero Himmel, who is lauded as the true slayer of the Demon King, a human priest by the name of Heiter, a dwarf warrior by the name of Eisen, and the elven mage Frieren. However, as Frieren is the only immortal out of these 4, one of the first things that we see happen in this story is that she just kind of disappears from this group of heroes for 50 years and comes back to all of them to see that they're elderly and that they're dying essentially, and thus immediately Frieren is hit in the face with the realization that she's going to lose everybody she originally loved, which is why prior to this she didn't associate with humans really, as she was just on a journey to capture all magical knowledge. However, because Frieren, after their 10-year journey together, spent 50 years away from the heroes, when she comes back and spends a brief amount of time with Himmel, who was effectively the only love in her life, he dies of old age, and she realizes at his funeral that she should have put more stock in the lives of her mortal friends. And thus now, since over 50 years have passed since the heroes defeated the Demon King, Frieren is once again on a journey with humans, trying to make it to a place known as Heaven at the northernmost part of the continent, where she believes she could once again reconvene with Himmel. And if I told you anything more, it would spoil the plot of this story. But trust me when I say, if you're looking for one of the most beautifully told, compelling stories you've ever interacted with, be it live action TV, anime, manga, books, anything, I genuinely cannot recommend Freyrin higher. There are two anime in existence that I genuinely believe ascended beyond the realm of anime into what could only be considered art. And those two anime are Vinland Saga and Freyrin. But if you wanted to wait until more of the story was out, genuinely, I couldn't blame you. I still feel a deep longing inside of my chest now that I've finished the 28 episodes that were available to me. And with that, those are my top 10 female-led anime ranked and explained. But do you guys agree with my list? Is there anything that I missed, or would you rearrange the order? Tell me in the comments below, and why goes it down there, please, for me. Like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Oh, Nick, what about Hunter x Hunter? Hunter x Hunter is my favorite anime of all time, but Vinland Saga and Freyrin have ascended beyond anime.